Give me a countdown. All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Dynasty Wire. My name is Ivan Herrera, and I am so excited to be here with you guys because we have a fun-packed episode. We are back on our Would You Rather wide receiver series. And, of course, no show on the Dynasty Wire is ever complete without my good partner in crime, Mr. Spencer Smith. What's up, man?
Hey, man, doing good. I'm excited to be back. Had a great weekend with my wife. Went to Disney World and just had a good time, man. Had a good time. But I'm excited for this Would You Rather. I always love the wide receivers, so I'm ready to dive in, man. Ready to dive in.
Yeah. So a little quick of a rundown just so that way everyone is tracking what we are doing today. We are going to dive into some news around the NFL, give a brief recap over the NFL draft, and then what we'll do is we'll dive into the meat of the show, which is the actual wide receiver Would You Rather, and then we'll end it off as always with the verse of the week. So with that said, Spencer, the floor is yours for our news.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. All right. Well, to start some stuff off here, T. Higgins was looking for a contract in the range of the a 3-year, $70 million deal, similar to what the Colts wide receiver Michael Pittman received. But Cincinnati never approached an annual salary of $20 million in contract discussion. So obviously that's been halted. He's still wanting out, especially once the draft was getting closer and we saw that basically he had demanded this trade. I was under the assumption it was 100% happening. He was going to be a draft day trade, but you know what? Didn't happen. Undrafted free agent wide receiver Tariq Owens, son of Terrell Owens, signed with the 49ers. The Vikings have paused extension talks with Justin Jefferson due to preparing for the draft, but intend to reignite those talks with Justin Jefferson now. So now that the draft is over, it does seem that extension talks will go back into effect with Justin Jefferson, but we'll just have to see what that looks like as we have a lot of receivers still waiting to even get paid to see what the market's going to be like post Justin Jefferson. Texans wide receiver Tank Dell was shot in Florida at a nightclub as an innocent bystander. Thankfully, it was a minor wound and he will make a full recovery. Just thought that was a wild story. Stay safe out there, my friends. Patriots are signing star defensive lineman Christian Barmore to a 4-year extension worth $92 million per Adam Schefter, and he's not the only player to get signed over the last few days. The Chiefs signed star tight end Travis Kelce to a 2-year extension that makes him the highest paid tight end. Per Ian Rappaport, Kelce has been criminally underpaid for a while, so this is definitely something he deserved, but also the Raiders are signing free agent wide receiver Michael Gallup to a 1-year deal worth up to $3 million. Former Eagles center Jason Kelce is joining ESPN for a role on Monday night's football pregame show. So that ought to be cool. But that is all I got. That's all the news right now. So hopefully some more will come up maybe during the show. But as of right now, that's all I got.
My mistake. There we go. For those of you on the podcast, you guys were able to listen to me, but however, on the YouTube, you weren't. So let me redo that again. So, a lot of good news there. Of course, as an Eagles fan, it's so exciting to see Jason Kelce now transition. I think it's going to be so great for that ESPN pregame broadcast. But let's go ahead and just dive into the video. We have, of course, now our show of the day, which is the recap, the Would You Rather wide receiver edition. And this is a video where we're going to dive deep into 2 different wide receivers, and each wide receiver will have a list of wide receivers that we are going to be comparing him to. So in this case, we are going to kick it off with Drake London. And the list that we have from Mr. Spencer Smith, who have created this concoction, is we're going to go ahead and go with Drake London versus Brandon Ayuk, Jaden Waddle, Michael Pittman Jr., and Devontae Smith. And after that, we're going to dive into CeeDee Lamb, who has an elite list that he needs to go up with, which would be Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, Amon St. Brown, and A.J. Brown. And actually, you know what? Let's start there because I actually read the notes wrong. So we'll start off with CeeDee Lamb first up against those guys. And we're going to go and kick it off with a very tough one, which I think arguably we can agree that these two are going to be, rather this list that you first created with CeeDee Lamb and these wide receivers are going to be the ones that you'll more than likely see coming out of your draft first as far as wide receivers go. So, Spencer, do you want to go and take the first one with CeeDee Lamb going up against Jamar Chase?
Yeah, man. So this one for me, I think that this one's a little easier than the next one. I should say, it's a little tougher than the next one, but for me, CeeDee Lamb versus Jamar Chase. Look, CeeDee Lamb has finally gotten into the thing about CeeDee Lamb really throughout his career is the lack of consistency. You know, you see in 2020, he gets 111 targets, but only 74 receptions. 2021, 120 targets, 79 receptions. 2022 gets fed like crazy, plays all 17 games, 156 targets. Still a little, he does have 107 receptions. But this past year, with 181 targets and 135 receptions, 1,749 yards, 12.96 yards per catch, and of course, those 12 receiving touchdowns and 2 rushing touchdowns. Just an absolute monster year by CeeDee Lamb. Now, of course, Jamar Chase is a freak of his own, but we do know that here, as of late, he has been dealing with some injuries. You know, last year he missed 1 game. The year before he missed 4 games. But even still, with missing 1 game last year, he finishes the wide receiver 11 in full PPR, 145 targets, 100 receptions, 1,216 yards, 12.16 yards per catch, and 7 receiving touchdowns. The thing for when it comes to Jamar Chase versus CeeDee Lamb for me is if I'm guaranteed that I'm getting Joe Burrow for the full season versus I'm guaranteed I'm getting Dak Prescott for the full season, then to me, this one is almost just who do you like watching, I guess, a little bit more. I mean, it's so close for fantasy that if we get the full season of Joe Burrow, then Jamar Chase is going right back to that top tier. I mean, as a rookie, he finished wide receiver 5. So, yes, CeeDee Lamb is coming off of wide receiver 1 finish, and I'm trying my best not to have too much of that recency bias with it. But for me, the uncertainty of Dak Prescott post this season, that's the only reason I lean Jamar Chase, because T. Higgins is out. This is going to be 100% Jamar Chase's room alongside Joe Burrow, who they just paid. They're making sure they can pay Jamar Chase. And yes, CeeDee Lamb is going to get paid, which is what you want. He's still a top 3 receiver for fantasy football. But Jamar Chase, to me, and I know it's a big if, but if we're going to get full Joe Burrow seasons, and of course they're paired up for the next at least 4 or 5 years, whereas CeeDee Lamb and Dak Prescott, they are paired up this year. You're going to want it. But this being dynasty, give me Jamar Chase.
Yeah, that's a good way to break it down because I think the big underlying factor is that of the contract with actually both of these guys. I mean, we know that CeeDee Lamb is more inclined to get paid over Dak Prescott. However, that probably is what makes the big difference, right? Is that we know that with Chase, he's going to be the guy there. And actually, for now, I actually gave it to Lamb only because I believe that he has been, I mean, it's clear he's been phenomenal. He's been a target monster. He had 12 games last year, just to add some more stats on what you had shared, with 9+ targets, and 11 of those games happened between week 8 and 13. So a very crucial time in fantasy. He was hot. He was someone that you relied upon. And this upcoming season, I know that there's still a lot of question marks with what's happening with T. Higgins, but I think regardless, though, I think to your point, if all goes well as far as the health concerns for Joe Burrow and even Jamar Chase, you're going to want to take Jamar Chase. This upcoming season, I'm going to lean on Lamb, and I do believe that Dak will have a contract situation figured out, and that's probably why I didn't take that into consideration as much as you are, but that's still a valid point. But I'm going to lean in with CeeDee Lamb on this one. And
definitely fair. I would say this year is CeeDee Lamb. I would say this year is CeeDee Lamb.
Yeah, he's just absolutely phenomenal, just a target monster. And also, you know, Brandon Cooks is still there, but they didn't really do anything in the draft to take any targets away from him. And not that that was ever going to be the strategy, but because you know that that wide receiver room is featured exclusively for CeeDee Lamb, that makes me want to lean more on that side. All right, cool. Let's go ahead and transition to the next one. And this is someone that's also waiting to get paid as well. It's going to be wide receiver Justin Jefferson. And this one got a little tougher because if you asked me this one, Spencer, before the draft, I probably would have leaned more on Lamb. But post-draft, I'm now taking Justin Jefferson. Do you feel the exact same way?
I understand what you're saying, but I'm still going CeeDee Lamb. Now, I think before the draft, I completely agree it was 100% easy. I'm going CeeDee Lamb because, yes, Justin Jefferson will getting paid, and he'll be getting those targets. But are those targets coming from Sam Darnold? Are those targets coming from, one of these later round quarterbacks? I do feel more confident with J.J. McCarthy. Not this season. I don't think this season's going to be, oh my gosh, this is going to be incredible. Justin Jefferson will make up for a lot of the lacking that J.J. McCarthy will bring year one. But I just think that I don't know. I truly don't know. None of us do yet how good J.J. McCarthy is going to be with this offense. I thought J.J. McCarthy was at best a late first round pick in this draft. I did not think he was going to be a top 10 pick. He barely was at pick 110, but due to them trading up and, Sean Payton being excited that he baited these teams or whatever. But I digress. To me, I think it was a reach. Now, of course, outside of the big three quarterbacks, you're going to reach, right? Like, look at what the Falcons did. That's a whole other, we could talk about that next week. But I just think that he was at best a late first round, early second round quarterback. And I don't want to say that they've got their guy 100% because we've seen this time and time again that, a team gets a top 10 quarterback and then either the next year or 2 years later, they realize they got to draft somebody else and he's traded. I mean, look at what the Bears have done to Justin Fields. And Justin Fields, when healthy, especially last year, was very productive. Maybe not as much the years before, but last year was his best year when he was healthy. And they knew that they were going to be able to get Caleb Williams, not because of their own draft pick, but because of what they did with the Panthers. So I just think that even though he is now attached to J.J. McCarthy, the flip side to my argument is J.J. McCarthy could actually be that guy, in which case you would have been more happy that you had Justin Jefferson. I'm going to go with CeeDee Lamb because I know what we've got in Dak Prescott. And to the adverse of what I was saying in my previous argument, I'm going to hope Dak Prescott stays. I don't have to have that hope if I'm comparing him to Jamar Chase when I know Jamar Chase has Joe Burrow. But I can have that hope just like somebody's going to have the hope J.J. McCarthy works out, that Dak Prescott stays, and this tandem between what we already know is Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb versus what we don't know in J.J. McCarthy and Justin Jefferson. But that's why I'm going to go CeeDee Lamb still.
Yeah, and that's a really good argument. I think that's probably the best counter going with Lamb over Jefferson because you're right. Rookies, there's so many question marks. I mean, I think a lot of people are putting a lot of faith, as am I, with Kevin O'Connell being able to develop a system with the weapons that they have there in Minnesota to have a successful season for J.J. McCarthy. And there's the intangibles of how accurate he is as a passer that make me positive that he'll be successful there. But you're right. We already have something that's proven with Dak that shows that CeeDee Lamb has been productive and that this duo can be something still pretty elite despite whatever contract situations are still up in the air. All right, cool. Let's go ahead and transition over to the next one. This one should be a fun one because both of these systems are really, really great as far as their offense goes. And we have Amon-Ra St. Brown from the Lions going up against CeeDee Lamb. For me, I'll get to it first. I'm going to go with CeeDee Lamb, even though I personally love the offensive system there that Detroit has. And we've gone over this offense several times. And I love the fact that they have Sam Laporta. They have a lot of good weapons, and they didn't add another wide receiver into this room. And again, very similar to that of CeeDee Lamb, not that them drafting another wide receiver would have even, just hampered the production of Amon-Ra St. Brown since he's clearly the number one wide receiver in this offense. But CeeDee Lamb has shown higher peaks, and that's why for me it was an easy selection going up against Amon-Ra St. Brown. What about you?
Yeah, so I love Amon-Ra St. Brown. I love the fact that he also just got paid. So Amon-Ra St. Brown just got that big contract. The deal, though, or the issue, I guess you could say, is that it's now been reported over the last 16, 17 days, over and over again, that Jared Goff expected to receive big money, but then it says Jared Goff and the Lions are not close to an extension. Then it says no new deal imminent for Jared Goff. So,
Yeah.
you know, to me, and after what after what Adam Schefter says here, that Goff is reportedly not close to agreeing on a new long-term deal with the Lions, and that was 6 days ago. To me, again, I think with Amon-Ra St. Brown, he is an absolute monster. He's a beast. He's got the payday. Last couple of years, wide receiver 7 finish, wide receiver 3 finish. And of course, he gets the targets. He gets the receptions, 1,100 yards, 22, 1,500 yards, 23, and 10 touchdowns this past year. An incredible year by Amon-Ra, but the fact that we don't know what this looks like with him without Jared Goff. And I think with Dak Prescott, we can see that at least even when Dak Prescott's out, he's such a superstar that he can make up. Now, again, the ball can't be thrown 5 yards to his right all the time. But I just think that I'm going to go with CeeDee Lamb here as well over Amon-Ra St. Brown.
And yeah, you're right, because one of the main variables that we have with Amon St. Brown versus Lamb is that he has a contract, and we like seeing that in Dynasty. All right, cool. The last one is going to be AJ Brown versus CeeDee Lamb, and this one was a lot closer. And I think it's number one because we saw how great Brown was last season. Despite what happened with Philadelphia, he was getting crazy production. His targets continued to increase, and it's nuts because I remember when he first came to Philadelphia, and he was entering his first season with Hurts as his starter. We were concerned about how he would be producing, considering that Philadelphia at the time was more of a running team. But they have completely flipped the script now with AJ Brown, with the development of Jalen Hurts as a passer. But you see that there's so many offensive weapons here in this offense, and that's what gets me inclined. Where in real football, I'll take AJ Brown, but in fantasy football, I'm taking CeeDee Lamb only because he's bound to be the one that will feast more, considering that there's less mouths to feed. And I know that Dallas just signed Ezekiel Elliott, but that in no way makes you feel like you're going to be losing out on fantasy value for CeeDee Lamb. So for me, the short answer is Lamb for that reason. Not saying that he's better than AJ Brown, but fantasy wise, I'll take the production and the fact that he's going to be the main one that will be just benefiting from getting all those targets there in Dallas.
Nope, I agree. I think that, NFL, real football wise, I think I'd rather have AJ Brown. But as far as fantasy goes, your point is just, I'm just going to piggyback off your point. Less to have to deal with on CeeDee Lamb with the Cowboys, whereas AJ Brown not only has Devonta Smith, but Dallas Goedert, Quez Watkins, and of course, now Saquon Barkley's going to be taking some of those along with Kenneth Gainwell. So, it's just a lot more. And the thing we do like, again, and I love this about AJ Brown. So if you want AJ Brown, he just signed that 3-year extension. I mean, he's locked up for a while with what we already know works with Jalen Hurts. So is Devonta Smith. And the thing you can bank on with Brown is that when the offense is going downhill, he will always be the benefactor. So if
that's right,
the offense isn't working one game, then instead of pivoting to focus on highlighting Devonta Smith, they typically just go to what they know. They're big boy. They go to AJ Brown. But even still, I will go CeeDee Lamb.
Absolutely. And that's what makes it a very close conversation, is because even when this offense is in shambles, AJ Brown's going to be the main one that will get them out of that rut. All right, cool. Let's go ahead and transition out of the next one, which this one's going to be very interesting because all these are relatively close. When I was looking at my rankings after you sent this list, Spencer, I saw these guys are literally within, maybe 3 or 4 ranks of one another. So it wasn't going to be like a very easy conversation whatsoever when it comes to comparing, which I appreciate. So let's go ahead and transition to someone that's been in the headlines a lot because of the draft day rumors, because of whether or not we thought he would be moved. And let's go kick it off with Brandon Ayuk versus Drake London. Would you rather have Drake London or Brandon Ayuk?
Yeah, so to me, this one's really easy. And I love Brandon Ayuk. We've got to see the past couple of years, wide receiver 15, wide receiver 14 finish and over 1,000 yards each year, or the past couple of years, and 7 or 8 touchdowns. But I'm going Drake London. I just think that, and especially now with Kirk Cousins, Drake London has had awful quarterback play. And yes, he's not even finished inside the top 30, but he has had awful quarterback play. And now you get Kirk Cousins. we don't know where Brandon Ayuk's going to go. Maybe if we knew, we would feel better about it. But it's going to get pretty hard for fantasy football to get any better than Kirk Cousins throwing you the ball. And,
Right.
So Kirk Cousins was able to hold up Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen, Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison and TJ Hawkinson. So Kirk Cousins is not no scrub for fantasy football. I am too excited to see what's going to go down with Drake London and Kirk. Even if it's only a 2-year thing, Michael Penix comes in, or it's the full 4 years. I don't care. I want Drake London over Brandon Ayuk.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm on the same vein. I saw their stats and they're almost identical. The main thing that worked in Brandon Ayuk's favor is that he had more touchdowns. So, and it's crazy because when you look at Drake London's numbers, he had some. So here, I had some stats here where despite him having bad quarterback play, he has had back-to-back season where he's back-to-back seasons where he has had 100 plus targets. So he's someone that is going to get featured in this offense, and he has a more accurate quarterback. And the thing is, he's only had 15 red zone targets in each of the last 2 seasons. So that's a total of 30 in his career, and that's only netted him 6 career touchdowns. And I believe that number will change considering that Kirk Cousins is a very accurate quarterback. And just like you alluded to, he's a very fantasy-friendly quarterback to the weapons that he has on his roster. So that's why for me, with the trade concerns with Brandon Ayuk, he could go to a scenario where he's now the number 1 guy, and we would be really excited about that. But we don't know when that'll take place, if that'll take place. And that's why for me, the certainty makes me lean on London. Okay, let's go ahead and now go to a wide receiver who's been great for fantasy, and that's going to be Jalen Waddle out of the Miami Dolphins. And I'll go kick it off on this one. Jalen Waddle, even though he is the second option on this Miami offense team as far as receivers go, he is one of the very few wide receivers that you would love to have on your roster in fantasy. I mean, I put him in the tier of like T. Higgins, Devonta Smith. Of course, Waddle himself would be in that tier where you still are happy with him being one of your main wide receivers on your roster, despite him being the number 2. And the thing is, he has an explosive skill set that makes him really great at being able to separate between him and his defenders. He was second in the route win rates last year. And that's why for me, I'm going to still lean on London. I think I made it sound like I was going to go Waddle, but no, I'm going to go London just because he's the number 1 option there. You obviously have Kyle Pitts. You still have some other receivers that Atlanta made some moves for, but London for me is the number 1, and that's why it's easy for me to go London over Jalen Waddle. How about you?
No, I agree. I think, it's easy when Jalen Waddle is healthy. It's easy to maybe say Jalen Waddle. But 2 things that it's just the same 2 things that you pointed out. Drake London is the wide receiver 1 for the Falcons, but also 2, Jalen Waddle's injury. Sure, he's maybe not missed the most amount of games. He's only missed 4 in his career, but it's not all about just missing games. I mean, we can look at his play log. There's so many games where he didn't miss the game, but in week 7 against Philly, he only played 45%. In week 6 against Carolina, he only played 69%. A lot of games where he's only playing in the 60s. Week 16, he played 43% because he got injured and had to leave the game. So there's just a lot of times that even though if you're just looking at the overall amount of games that he played, sure, he only missed 3 this year or 1 this other year. But if you look at the percentages of the snap percentage of which he plays, there's so many in the 60s, a few in the 40s, where, he gets hurt and he has to miss the rest of the game or he can't play the rest of the game. So to me, it's just, again, piggybacking off of what you said, I'm going Drake London.
Yeah. All right, cool. So as we get ready to round it out, we have a couple left here. The next one we have is Michael Pittman Jr. versus Drake London. And for me, this one was going to be Michael Pittman Jr. I just love Michael Pittman Jr. so much. I think he's so talented, very similar to that of Drake London, where they're both big body wide receivers, both at 6'4". And for me, Pittman Jr. is also the number 1 in his own respective offense. And he has been accruing targets like crazy. He's been someone that has been featured heavily in this offense. Someone, despite having a few touchdowns, not as thrown to him as often, he's still someone that produces in fantasy football and someone that just recently got the bag. So he's someone that is locked in there in Indianapolis, someone who's not only locked in, but locked in as the number 1 wide receiver option there for Anthony Richardson. And we saw that even though Richardson went down, obviously Minshew is more of a pocket quarterback, but I feel that Michael Pittman Jr. is someone that has been producing despite the questionable things that we have at the quarterback position. So for me, Michael Pittman Jr.
Yeah, this one was close. But spoiler alert, I'm still going to go Drake London. And I think everything that you just said about Michael Pittman Jr. is incredibly fair. I think Michael Pittman Jr., especially with his contract and being locked to Anthony Richardson, it feels safe. It feels nice. But we did see that Michael Pittman's game elevated when Anthony Richardson was not in there. Now it's too small of a sample size to say that's how it's going to be when Anthony Richardson's on the field. I don't believe that that's necessarily how it's going to be, but Anthony Richardson is definitely run first. Hopefully that his running is incredible, but he's not as injury safe as far as his body is concerned like Cam Newton. Like Cam Newton could run through 5, defensive players and not get hurt, whereas it seems like there's some tweak, something that's happened to Anthony Richardson every game so far of his 4 games played. So I would just say that I still lean Drake London with Kirk Cousins. And again, maybe that experiment is only 2 years, but if I'm going to get 2 years of Drake London with the most accurate deep ball passer for fantasy football, one of them in the league, then I would much rather have that. It's still close for me, but I am going to go Drake London.
All right, very good. Well, it's good to see 2 different takes here. So let's go ahead and round it out. And the final one is our very beloved Devontae Smith versus Drake London. And this argument for me is only because London is the number 1 on his offense. Devontae is the number 2. So that was my take.
That's my take as well. And pretty much like I was saying with A.J. Brown to CeeDee Lamb, when the offense starts to fall apart, they're going to Brown. They're not going to Smith. So, that's a risk you got to play. But yeah, Drake London, this one's easy.
Absolutely. Okay, so that was our Would You Rather series for the week. And of course, we will be having another one next week. It'll be our tight end edition, or I think quarterback. I don't know which one we will go with, but we'll see which one we pivot to. But be sure to continue and follow along that journey. We did have a plan to go over a brief recap of the draft, but we'll go ahead and punt on that for now for the sake of time. We're going to go into the verse of the week, and then we'll go ahead and close out this episode. And Mr. Spencer Smith, do you feel comfortable going off first with this one?
Let's do it, man. My verse of the day, verse of the week, comes from 2 Peter 1:3. As his divine power has given to us all things that pertain to life and godliness through the knowledge of him who called us by glory and virtue. 2 Peter 1:3 basically states God has given us everything we need for living a godly life. And it's just so true. I mean, it's so simple. And read his word, pray. And like Ivan has said, I think multiple times across this podcast, do what you do daily for Christ and glorify what you're doing, whether that is a podcast, whether that is you're working at Walmart, whether that's you're working at a toothpaste cap factory. Put those toothpaste caps on the best you can. And while you might not be in the place you thought you were going to be for Christ, whether it's there or whether you are in the mission field, do everything for him and just pray, just read your word. God has given us everything we need for living a godly life. 2 Peter 1:3.
Amen. Good stuff, man. And it's so funny. I feel like, man, it's so awesome how God plans this out, because I have a very similar verse. And let me go ahead and get into mine. It comes out of the book of Genesis in chapter 25. And I'm going to specifically read verse number 21. So, all right. So the reason why I'm choosing this verse is because... All right, there you go. So the reason why I'm choosing this verse is because recently in my church, we're actually currently going over a series called Family Circus. And in this series, we're going over how to conduct ourselves within family struggles, between family conflict. And in this specific verse of the Bible, we are getting into the story of Jacob and Esau. This is a very juicy story. I highly recommend you go check it out. It's in Genesis 25. There's so much wisdom there embedded within this story. However, the one I want to focus on is specifically where Isaac, who is married to Rebecca, both of them are actually struggling because they can't have a child. So she is barren. And I love how this verse reads out. It says here in verse 21, now Isaac pleaded with the Lord for his wife. Another way of saying that is now he prayed for his wife because she was barren. and the Lord granted his plea, and Rebekah, his wife, conceived. Now, before you come after me saying that I'm talking about this whole prosperity thing of, oh, if you pray something, you'll get it. No, I'm just saying that, like, the thing I want to speak to specifically is for you husbands. So for those of us that are married, I love how in this verse, Isaac is pleading with the Lord for his wife. So he's praying for his wife, he's praying on behalf of his wife. And I think that's one of the roles that I at times take for granted as a husband, that maybe I don't pray as often as my, like for my wife. And that's one thing that I'm challenging myself on now, that I'm, got this revelation of like, wow, like I loved how Isaac pleaded. And in this context, it took some time. Apparently they were barren for a long, long time. So this season was one where they had to endure. And in that season of enduring, his way of enduring for his wife was to pray for his wife. So for those of you that are married, of course, Spencer, you are in this category as well. One challenge that I'm doing that I would love for all of us to take a part in is taking that time to pray earnestly for our families, pray earnestly for our wives, never underestimating the role that God has entrusted on us, and never underestimating the power of prayer. And what I mean by that is that God will always respond, not always with the yes, but he will respond with revelation of like, not right now, or no, this isn't really what you really want. This is where I'm going to direct you, but trusting in his divine sovereignty to give us the wisdom to press forward. And that, my friends, is the verse of the week for me.
Let's go, man. I love it. I love it.
All right, guys. Well, now that we are landing the plane, as always, thank you so much for tuning in. Me and Spencer greatly appreciate you guys downloading, subscribing, and we encourage you to continue to do that. So if you have not already subscribed on our YouTube channel, be sure to hit that subscribe button and hit that push notification bell. That way you do not miss out on any of the information that we have posted. And Spencer, go ahead and round it out and give us the social media platforms on how people can connect with us.
Yes, sir. So at the Dynasty Wire, or at Dynasty Wire on Instagram, at Dynasty Wire on TikTok, and at the Dynasty Wire on X. So just go through all three of those. And like Ivan said, just make sure you're subscribed to here so that every time on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, when it gets released, you are immediately notified.
There we go, guys. We pray you guys were blessed with this episode and found a lot of value. Be sure to tune in next week when we go over another edition of Would You Rather here on the Dynasty Wire.
Yep.
See you guys.
See you.